My name is Donald. I'm 71 years old, I'm a retired engineer, and I've lived most of my life in Scarsdale, New York. I've buried the woman I loved, raised a daughter practically alone, and learned to be silent even when the soul screamed. But tell me something. Have you ever been called a loser in front of your own family? Because that's what happened to me at that dinner. My son-in-law laughed out loud, full of expensive wine in his mouth, looked me right in the eyes and asked, "What's it like to be a loser?" The whole table froze. And me? I just smiled. But inside, something has turned. If you've ever felt that lump in your throat for helping too much and being treated as less, you'll understand what I experienced. If you've ever done everything for someone, paid for a house, school, doctor, and then been forgotten, then this story is yours too. Today I'm going to tell you how an arrogant question changed my entire life. You will understand why silence can be the greatest answer, and you'll discover how a silent loser almost kept a family standing, alone. Sometimes, to be heard, we just need to stop paying. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know one thing. Sometimes it only takes one sentence to turn a silent father into someone no one recognizes anymore. Mine was this: "What is it like to be a loser?" He said this with his glass of wine raised, surrounded by applause as if he had won some war. I just smiled. But inside I knew that from that moment on, everything would change. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make a scene. I just calmly returned. And what is it like to know that this loser will no longer pay his bills? The silence that came after was not only from the room, it was their conscience. And what happened in the next 72 hours? Well, to this day there is a neighbor in Westchester who remembers that week. But the scariest thing wasn't what I cut. That's what I discovered. So if this story has touched you in any way so far, if you've ever felt the pain of doing too much and being treated as little, I ask you, leave your like, subscribe to the channel not only for me, but for all the people who have been called a loser just because they loved in silence. It helps me keep telling stories that the world often ignores. It was a cold night in Scarsdale, one of those when the wind cuts through the skin even with the coat closed to the neck. I remember because Amanda's house was all lit up, as if it were Christmas Eve, and the smell of roasting meat could already be felt outside. She took care of the table. Tall candles, shiny cutlery, cloth napkins. The boys, my grandchildren, wore the uniform of the private school in Greenwich. Impeccable. Travis opened the door with that wide smile that never convinced me. "Donald, come in, we're waiting for you." The dinner was to celebrate his promotion, regional manager in Stamford, a large position with a high salary according to him. But the truth is that that dinner was not a family celebration. It was a showcase. I understood this as soon as I entered. It was all set up as a staging. The French wine, the Wagyu from a Colorado farm, and the crystal glasses that I myself helped buy the second Christmas after Margaret left. Travis was already sitting at the head of the table, and it hit me like an invisible needle. That has always been my place, not out of vanity but out of history. It was at that end that I sat at Sunday dinners, birthdays, and even the day Amanda told me she was pregnant with Tyler. Now I was a spectator. The conversation began politely. Travis spoke loudly, as if he wanted to show that he was in charge. He said that the new position required travel, important decisions. He commented that the company was expanding to Atlanta, and in the middle of it all he looked at me with a certain pleasure, as if he expected me to ask more. I just listened, cutting the steak slowly. "And you, Donald?" he asked, swirling the wine in the glass. "How's life without deadlines, without a boss in your ear?" I replied calmly, "It has its moments." He laughed. "It must be good. Just wake up, drink coffee, and wait for nap time." Amanda let out a nervous smile. I've known her since I was a little girl afraid of the dark. When she is uncomfortable, she fiddles with the bracelet. And that night she kept twirling the bracelet on her wrist. It was the same one I gave her last Christmas. But Travis didn't stop. "You had a good run as an engineer, right? But what was that, 40 years ago? The world has changed. Today everything is digital, fast, competitive. We need to always be ahead. Emma, my granddaughter, tried to defend me. Grandpa built my treehouse." Travis stroked her head like a dog pat. "This is sweet, honey. But Grandpa needs to understand that real men support their families with hard work. You can't live on retirement alone." There, I took a deep breath, because the tease was getting personal. Amanda tried to change the subject, talked about Emma's piano recital, but Travis had already had 2 glasses, and his inflated ego no longer fit in the room. I was thinking, now that I'm earning a six-figure salary, maybe it's time for everyone to pull their own weight. Caroline, for example, has been out of work for a long time. Maybe it's time to go back. She turned pale, and I knew why. Everything there, the children's clothes, the BMW rental, the newly renovated kitchen, was supported by my deposits. Travis continued, I don't want to be harsh, Donald, but when was the last time you built something real? What satisfaction did he feel to conquer with his own hands? That's when he dropped the phrase, like a bomb on the table. What's it like to be a loser? The silence was so heavy that I could hear the sound of the candle melting. Tyler stopped chewing. Amanda froze. And I looked at him, not angry, clearly. The same one I used when I was drawing up the foundation calculations of a bridge. The same one that made me build my life with my feet on the ground. I raised the glass of water. I didn't want wine that night. I took a sip, put it in place with precision, and I asked, looking him straight in the eye, and what's it like to know that this loser is no longer going to pay his bills? The color disappeared from his face as if they had pulled a thread. Amanda put her hand to her mouth. The children looked at each other, confused, and I kept eating my dinner, cutting the meat slowly as if nothing had happened. At this moment, allow me a break. There are things that we keep for years. He pushes, swallows hard, thinking that one day they will understand. But sometimes, the only way to be heard, it is to stop feeding the silence. If you've ever experienced something similar, if you've ever been diminished by someone who should thank you, comment below. I've lived it. It touched me. Or it's true. Because there are a lot of people watching who need to know that they are not alone. That night I left my daughter's house without slamming the door. It was not necessary. He had already said everything he needed. But what no one knew, it was what awaited me when I arrived at my office and opened the first drawer of that metal shelf. Because here were 15 years of generosity that they pretended not to remember. And what I discovered in the papers that night changed everything. You won't believe what came next. I drove home slowly with my hands firmly on the wheel, but with my heart so tight that it seemed to take up the entire passenger seat. The streets of Westchester were almost deserted at that time of night. Only the streetlights cast long shadows on the empty sidewalks. The radio was off, as always. I like silence, but that night, the silence spoke too loudly. Every kilometer I traveled brought a memory, a thank you, that never came, a cross look from Travis, a call from Amanda asking for help for an unforeseen event, a renovation, a school, a trip that didn't fit in their budget, but that always fit in mine. When I parked in the garage, I spent a few minutes with my hands still on the wheel, as if my mind needed time to reach my body. I went inside, hung my coat on the same hook as always, put the kettle on the fire and went to my office. A small room, with old furniture and the smell of old wood mixed with worn paper. I turned on the table lamp and sat down in front of the steel bookcase where, out of habit, or perhaps an engineer's instinct, I kept everything. Almost no one knew that that corner of the house was more organized than any bank vault. I pulled out the first drawer, labeled 2009-2012. The label was kind of faded, but the contents were not. Each folder, separated by colors, blue for mortgage assistance, green for vehicle financing, yellow for children's school, red for medical expenses. I took the first spreadsheet, referring to February 2009. Amanda's house mortgage, $2,800. I remembered her desperate phone call a month after Margaret's funeral. Dad, Travis lost an important commission and we're on the edge. I paid, and I kept paying, month after month, without ever asking for anything in return, just for love. But that night, love needed memory. I pulled the columns of values, I added the totals. Mortgage, $2,800 per month for 15 years, almost $500,000 there. Then the cars. Travis's rented BMW, the same one he insisted on parking in front of the restaurant for Sunday lunches, cost $650 a month, for 8 years. I also added Amanda's SUV, the early exchanges, the advances I covered when the installments were late. Then came the schools. I remember Amanda's enthusiasm when she managed to get Tyler into Centura Academy. Dad, it's an amazing school. Advanced English, French, heated pool. I just said, if that's what you think is best for him, I'll help. And I helped. I helped so much that the bills started to come straight to my name. $24,000 per year, 2 grandchildren, Almost 200,000 in 8 years. And then there were the dentists, the trips, the holidays in Aspen, the Christmas toys, the summer camps. Each line I read seemed to tell a different story, a story in which I was the main character, but which, at dinner that night, no one wanted to remember. There, in front of all that paperwork, with the yellowish light of the lamp reflecting on the glasses, I realized that I was not a loser. I was the pillar, the entire foundation. Without me, that house they called home would have collapsed long ago. And it was there, at that exact moment, that something inside me changed. It wasn't anger, nor desire for revenge. It was clarity. For the first time in many years, I saw the size of the lie that I myself helped to sustain. And I understood that if I wanted some justice, it wouldn't come with screams or scandals. It would come with silence and strategy. With a simple plan: cut off the flow, cut through the illusion, to cut the invisible cord that kept them afloat in a world that was never theirs. But before you cut, I needed to see everything, know everything. And what I found in the next drawer was even more disturbing, because there was the receipt that erased any doubt about who, in fact, supported that family. And you will understand why. In the next part, I'll tell you what was in that yellow envelope, the one that to this day makes my hands tremble when I open it. Do you know why? Because in that envelope, it was the final proof that the ungrateful at the table never paid even for his own chair. The first folder I took from the shelf was marked with the year 2009. I recognized that date from afar, as if recognizing the face of someone who has already hurt a lot. It was the year I buried Margaret, my ground, the only person who looked at me as if every silence of mine had a reason. I remember Amanda crying at the wake, with Tyler still on her lap and Emma holding my hand firmly. That night she said to me, "Dad, I don't know how we're going to continue. Travis is not able to close any sale. The bank has already threatened the house." I didn't hesitate. I took a check and covered the $3,000 they owed on the mortgage. It was just the beginning. In the briefcase, I found the receipt of that check, folded carefully, along with a note of mine in pencil. For now. I thought it was a one-off help, but the following years showed me that for now it has become routine. In the 2010 portfolio, the situation was already different. Financing a new car for Travis, a Honda that he would later exchange for a BMW, saying that it was part of the professional image. I paid the deposit, and the first 12 installments. In 2011, Emma started attending a bilingual school, $100 to $800 per month. Amanda couldn't afford it. And Travis? He said he was investing everything in networking, but I never saw a penny coming from this networking. I followed through the folders, each one a year of my life mixed with their lives, and in each one the same story: requests, emergencies, justifications, and my signature at the end of the account. In 2014, Tyler's emergency surgery came, health plan with partial coverage, hospital in White Plains, $6,200 paid by me. In 2015, Amanda called me crying because the plumbing in the house burst. "Dad, it's going to be expensive. The insurance said it doesn't cover everything. The renovation of the pipe cost $12,000. Who paid?" In 2017, the BMW was already a reality. 0 kilometer, graphite color. Travis showed up at my house to show the news. He didn't even thank him. He only said, "Now I pass credibility to customers." I kept silent, because at that time, I still believed that to be silent was to love. I arrived in the 2019 portfolio. She was fuller than the others. There was an invoice for the renovation of the kitchen, the one with the central island, imported marble, planned cabinets. $40,000. Amanda sent me photos at the time, proud. "Look, Dad, it was a magazine thing." And it was. But the magazine that paid for that cover was me. There were also receipts of Emma's summer exchange trip, 3 weeks in Paris, with a French course and everything. Tickets, accommodation, insurance, pocket money in euros. I paid every penny. "Dad, it's a unique opportunity for her." I kept adding up, column by column, year by year. Mortgages, cars, schools, travel, emergencies. I got close to $950,000. I read that number and took a deep breath. Because more than a value, he told me something else. I had not just been a father. I had been the bank, the insurance, the health plan, the mechanic, the guarantor. But never, never again the man Travis looked upon with respect. I closed the 2023 folder carefully. His hands were a little shaky. It wasn't anger. It was tiredness. A tiredness that only those who have given too much for too long feel. I got up, went to the window, looked at the empty street. The snow was beginning to fall lightly, covering the sidewalks with a calm, false white. Everything looked clean, but I knew what was underneath. Just like that family. I went back to the desk, took a hardcover notebook and started to write down line by line everything I had paid for. I wrote unhurriedly, as if each number was a way of saying to myself, "You're not crazy." They forgot, yes, because that's what hurt the most. The absence of gratitude. The way they started to treat my support as an obligation, as if it was natural for me to pay for everything, while I was called outdated. A loser. I remembered the day of Margaret's funeral. The pastor looked at me and said, "Your legacy, Donald, will continue through your daughter." At the time, those words comforted me. Today, they hurt me. Because what continued, in fact, was the dependence. That night, sitting there surrounded by paper, silence, and cold coffee, I made the decision that changed everything. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to argue. He wasn't going to threaten. I was just going to turn off the taps and watch. But before I acted, I still needed to open one last folder. The one I always avoided. The one in 2008. The year it all began. The year I made the biggest promise of my life. I'm going to take care of our daughter. And it was there in that forgotten briefcase that I found the receipt that revealed a detail that even I had forgotten. And that would become the key to my whole plan. Do you have any idea what might be hidden in a single leaf, yellowed by time, but capable of changing everything you thought you knew about your own family? I woke up before the sun that morning. The body is still heavy from the silence of the night before, but the head was clearer than ever. I brewed my strong coffee just the way Margaret liked it, and sat down again in the office. The folders remained open on the table, as if they wanted to remind me of everything I had done for them. And for a moment, I confess, I hesitated, because there are things that we do not for them, but for ourselves. Helping Amanda for so many years made me feel that I was still needed, that my absence hadn't taken everything away along with Margaret. But that day, I understood that keeping the flow going was the same as feeding a lie, and I was no longer going to be part of it. I picked up the phone calmly. I put on my glasses. The notebook with the values was next to it, and I started. First call, the bank responsible for the mortgage on Amanda's house. I explained that I would like to suspend the monthly automatic debit that came out of my account. The attendant, polite, asked for my written authorization. I had already written the email. I forwarded it right away. He further asked, "Are you sure, Mr. Donald?" And I replied in a thread of voice that did not tremble. For the first time in 15 years, I have. Then it was the turn of the school in Greenwich. I called the financial sector. I spoke to a girl named Eleanor. Very kind. He knew me by name. Ah, Mr. Donald. Emma's and Tyler's grandfather, of course. Always so punctual in payments. I took a deep breath. "Eleanor, I have come to inform you that I will no longer make the monthly deposits. Their parents must now assume that." She was silent for a few seconds. "I see. We will miss you." I thanked him, and I hung up. Health insurance, business credit card that was in my name, internet account, car financing. One by one, I closed the leaks as if trying to save a house that can still be inhabited, but only if the residents learn to take care of it. There was no anger, no screaming, no bitter phrase, only the firmness of someone who has spent a lifetime designing structures that cannot fail. And now, for the first time, I needed to project a new one, that of my own dignity. With each cancellation, something inside me rearranged, as if I was going back to occupy the space I had left too vacant for too long. There was an hour between one call and another that I stopped and looked at Margaret's photo on the shelf. She was smiling, with that yellow scarf in her hair on the last trip we took to Lake George. It gave me a tightness in my chest. I promised I would take care of our daughter, I said in a low voice. But taking care, it's not carrying on your back. Right now, if you're still here with me, listening to this story that I never told anyone, I just wanted to ask you something. Leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. It's not just for me. It's because there are a lot of people like me out there. People who gave everything, but forgot to keep some for themselves. And I still have a lot to tell you. After finishing all the calls, I turned off the cell phone and put the landline on mute. I sat in silence and leaned my head against the armchair. The sound of the kettle beeping in the distance brought me back. I went to the kitchen, poured another cup of coffee, and sat on the porch, feeling the light chill of the morning hit my face. It was as if, after years, I could breathe fully. But I knew that silence would not last. I knew that, sooner or later, the phone was going to ring. Someone was going to knock on the door, or show up crying at the gate, because the day a man stops playing, it's the day when everyone discovers who really holds what. And when Amanda finally found out what I had done, what she said to me ran through more than any sentence of that dinner. Do you know why? Because it was there that I understood that she already knew. I just didn't want to admit it. Can you imagine what a daughter is capable of saying to her father? When do you see the account drying up? I'll tell you, word for word. And maybe when you hear it, you'll feel the same cold I did, even sitting in the sun. 2 days after that dinner, the phone rang for the first time. It was a number I knew well, and for a moment I thought about letting it ring until it fell on the desk. But something in me asked me to answer. Dad? Was Amanda. Her voice was broken, hurried, as if trying to appear calm as the ground begins to give way. The bank just called me. They said the mortgage wasn't paid that month. Has something happened to your account? I was silent for a few seconds. I looked at the wall clock. It was Tuesday, 9:13 a.m. At that same time, for 15 years, automatic debit happened like a Swiss watch. But not on that day. I took a deep breath and replied, nothing happened to my account. It happened to me. She laughed lightly, as if trying to keep the conversation light. Ah, so it's some mistake by the bank. Can you take a look? Maybe I need to authorize it again. I don't know. I closed my eyes for a moment. That hurt me more than I imagined. Not for the debt, but by the tone. For the theater. As if she hadn't felt the change? As if everything was still part of a predictable routine, she asks, I pay. And no one mentions dinner. No one mentions the word that echoed like a knife. Loser. I spoke softly, but firmly. It's not a mistake. It's a decision. On the other side, the silence was immediate. It was as if she didn't understand. Or maybe I understood too much. Dad, I don't understand you. It's just a mortgage you've always helped. It's your grandchildren's house, remember? And there I felt the twinge in my chest. Because when they want to manipulate, they throw their grandchildren in front. As if the love for them was enough to keep me on my knees. Amanda, I supported you for 15 years. With love, with sacrifice, with silence. But this was not a lifetime contract. It was help. And help ends. She stammered something along the lines of, but just now that Travis has been promoted. And I interrupted still calmly. Even better. Now you have a way to get by. Now it's time to live with what you have. A few more seconds of silence. I could almost hear her brain trying to find a new script, a new excuse, a new emotional input. But nothing came. She just said, in a whisper, okay, Dad. And he hung up. I stared at my phone like someone looking at a relative who has just left. Because in a way, that's what was happening. Something was dying between us. And I let it die. That afternoon, I learned from a friend at school that the card used to pay Emma and Tyler's tuition had also been declined. Amanda tried another. Travis called there, tried to charm the secretary. It didn't work. The name that was linked to the registry was mine, and my name, for the first time, did not appear with balance. 2 days later, I received an email. Cold, direct. Signed by Amanda, but clearly written by Travis. Dad, we understand that you have decided to stop the contributions. We would just like to officially confirm so that we can reorganize our financial planning. I read that calmly. Contributions. As if I had been part of a voluntary fund. I almost responded with a, you're welcome for the $950,000. But I closed the laptop and went for a walk around the block. The cold air hit his face, cut his cheeks, but cleared his thoughts. I knew that this was just the beginning. That soon would come the most explicit requests, the pressures, perhaps even the attacks. But in that first contact, what I saw was something else. Panic. Because Amanda was finally realizing that Travis, with all the beautiful speech, with all the smile of a regional manager, didn't know how to hold a house standing without my base. And it was at that moment that I realized, did she know from the beginning that he never had structure? Was her silence all these years fearful? Or convenience? What if I told you there was something I hadn't told you yet? Something that happened even before their marriage, and that perhaps explained why I accepted so much for so long. Can you imagine that? Even before the first, "Dad, can you help?" I had already realized that this man was going to cost me dearly. Well then listen, because that's what I'm going to tell you now. He arrived unannounced, as he always did when he wanted to dominate the environment. He didn't knock, he didn't ring the bell. He just pushed the front door, which I still left unlocked out of habit, perhaps out of hope. He strode across the room, dragging his arrogance across the floor of my house, and stood before me as if in a courtroom. I was in the armchair reading the newspaper with my glasses on the tip of my nose. I didn't get up. I just folded the page calmly and looked at him over the lens. "Have you gone crazy?" he snapped. "Are you destroying us because of a bad joke?" That phrase, bad joke, as if it had all started there. As if the poison of ingratitude had been born that night and not in all the years he smiled at me as he pulled from my account the luxuries he would never have with his own effort. "I'm not destroying anyone, Travis," I said in a firm voice. "I just stopped financing the theater." He began to walk around the room, nervous, gesticulating, as if looking for something to point out, a contradiction, a mistake, any crack through which he could invert the narrative. "Amanda is panicking. The boys were left without a new uniform. The school is charging. Do you want us to be embarrassed?" I closed the newspaper and placed it in my lap. Calmly, "I want you to go through life with what you have, and apparently they don't have much." He approached. His voice rose. "You can't do that. This is financial abuse. I can call a lawyer. This is a breach of moral commitment to the family." I pointed with my chin to the office shelf, just behind him. "They're going to love seeing this documentation." He looked. The portfolios were aligned, all labeled. Every receipt, every note, every transfer saved with dates and destinations, like a silent diary of what no one ever wanted to admit, that without me, they wouldn't have lasted even 3 winters. For a moment he swallowed. It was almost imperceptible, but I saw it. His pride wavered, and in that second, I knew. He was afraid. "Amanda doesn't deserve this." He tried once more, his voice less confident. "She has always counted on you. You promised you would take care of her." I slowly got up from the seat. I was tired, but whole. I looked into his eyes as a man looks at another when he understands that he has lost respect, but not the truth. "I promised to take care of my daughter. And I did that for 15 years, but caring is not paying for her to live a life that is not hers. And you're not the one who's going to tell me what family is." We were silent. He tried to hold his gaze, but turned away. He went to the door. Before leaving, he turned and muttered, "She's going to suffer from this. Tell Amanda I'm available, if she wants to talk like an adult." He left without slamming the door. For the first time, he left no trace of superiority, just the hurried smell of someone who realized, too late, that the ground he walked on was borrowed. And I went back to my armchair, but I didn't open the newspaper. I stared at nothing for a while, because even when we do the right thing, it still hurts. And in that pain, I understood something that you may feel too. There are silences that are worth more than any speech. If you've been here so far listening to this, I can only tell you one thing with an open heart. It remains with me until the end, because what is to come, what I discovered days later, was the moment that turned my story inside out. Do you have any idea what happens when a son-in-law's mask falls off in front of his own wife? Because I saw it, and I never forgot it. Their lives began to crumble in silence. It wasn't overnight, but like someone who is slowly slipping down a slope that seems harmless at first. A week after Travis's visit, I heard from Mr. Charles, my neighbor 3 houses down, that Amanda's car had been towed very early in the morning. "Lack of payment, it seems," he whispered, as if trying to disguise the shame of others. It was the SUV that I had entered myself, the same one she used to pick up her children from school and take a photo on Instagram with the caption, "Gratitude." Days later, I received an automatic email from the Greenwich School informing me that the tuition fees were in arrears and that, in case of non-regularization, the children would be suspended from classes. The email, by mistake or not, was addressed to me. I just referred him to Amanda without a word. Travis canceled the spring trip to Orlando. Emma found out from her colleagues, and according to a friend of Amanda's, she cried for days. Amanda, who for years had lived in the comfort of being a full-time mother, and that's it, had to redo her resume and look for a job. 12 years out of business. The interviews were cold, short. "Recent experience?" they asked. "I'm a mother." And the answer came with a polite smile, but already defeated. The garden of their house, always so well cared for, began to show weeds on the edges. The flowers were not changed in season. The BMW is gone, replaced by a second-hand silver sedan. It didn't take long for the group of mothers at the school to start commenting. In cities like Scarsdale, any visual change becomes history in minutes. And it was then that electricity received the first cut notice. The paper taped to the garage door, yellow, screamed more than any of Amanda's screams. It was at this point that she called me. His voice was low, choked. None of that firm or indignant tone. Just a tired woman. A lost daughter. Dad, I don't know what else to do. On the other end of the line, I held my breath, because it was exactly what I had been waiting to hear for so long. Not out of revenge, but for recognition. Do you hear me? She insisted. The school will suspend the children. The power will be cut off. Travis is out of his mind. I leaned back in my chair, looking at the clock on the wall. The hands were turning, but it seemed that time had stopped for that sentence to come out in one piece. We need you. I got up and walked slowly to the window. The morning light came in timidly, gilding the edge of the furniture. I picked up the phone again and said, Amanda, now you need each other. I've already given everything I had to give. And when I realized that this was not enough, I understood that you needed to learn on your own. She cried on the other side. I heard, and as much as it cut me inside, I didn't give in. Because sometimes to love someone is to let that person face what they have always avoided. And here I need to ask you something, with all the sincerity that belongs to me in this life. Have you ever found yourself having to deny help to someone you love, so that this person finally grows up? Have you ever felt the pain of being silent, to save the other from their own illusion? If so, comment below with a "I know how it is" or a "I understand you," because I know I'm not alone in this kind of silence. Amanda hung up, saying she would try to solve it, but her tone, it was that of someone who realized that the ground was gone, and deep down, I knew I still had a piece in this domino about to fall, the biggest of them all, because she still didn't know what I had discovered in those papers from the past, and when he found out, maybe it was too late to pretend I didn't know. Have you ever wondered what happens when the truth, the one that has been hidden for years, decides to knock on the door? That's right. She hit, and it hit hard. That morning, I heard the light knock on the door before I even saw the parked car. It was a shy sound, almost embarrassed, as if he didn't know if he should be there. I got up slowly, opened the door, and there was Amanda. She was not the woman of expensive candlelight dinners, nor the mother of social media posts with inspiring captions. It was my daughter, with her face pale, her eyes sunken, and her shoulders bent by the weight of everything she had been carrying, and what, until then, she thought she could hide. Dad, she whispered, holding back tears. I didn't know it was so much. I spent a few seconds just watching. She was without makeup, her hair tied up anyway, a baggy blouse that seemed to have been chosen in a hurry. No sparkles, no shield. Come in, I said, and made room for her to pass. She walked slowly into the living room and sat down in the chair where Margaret had sewn for so many years. That chair held the smell of lap, of advice, of true love. Maybe that's why she sat there without realizing it, as if seeking shelter in instinct. The silence lasted for long seconds. I settled in the armchair and waited. She began but froze. And then with a choked voice, the children are afraid. Tyler asked yesterday if we're going to have to change schools. Emma cried because she heard the mothers commenting in the parking lot. Travis is a wreck. I took a deep breath. The words came loaded with something I hadn't seen in her for a long time. Humility. Father, she said once more, her eyes full but not allowing the tears to fall. I failed. We lived as if his support was eternal. And I allowed Travis to treat you like that. I kept quiet when I should have defended you. I remained silent. She ran her hand over her face, as if trying to wipe away the years, not just the tears. Forgive me for forgetting who you were, who you are. For us, the truth is, you were the ground, and we stepped on it without looking down. I looked at her there, stripped of vanity, and for a moment I saw the 5-year-old girl running through the halls with the dolls in her hand, calling Margaret Mommy of the Heart, and telling me that I was the strongest man in the world. I got up carefully, went to the kitchen, served 2 coffees. I went back and handed her a cup. She sat up straighter, as if that simple gesture had the power to rebuild something. Amanda, I began. You have two choices now. And I'm not speaking as a father. I'm speaking as someone who has lived long enough to know what it is to truly live. I can help the children. I will not let them be in need. But both of you and Travis, are going to have to learn to live with what you earn, to build with what they have, to accept the life they can afford, or else they can continue to pretend that they are what they never were. But then, don't count on me anymore. She looked at me as if the words were punches and relief at the same time. I don't want to pretend anymore, she said. I want to change. We stayed there for a while. No rush. Because the time that corrodes can also heal, if we let it. You know, there is a moment in life when we stop waiting for the other to come back with flowers, and begins to value the simple fact that he comes back with truth. Seeing my daughter like this, broken but real, showed me that maybe there was still a chance. Not to recover everything, but to start something new. But she still didn't know what I knew. And when he found out, when I revealed that only paper kept since before the wedding, the one that brought the truth she never knew, everything was going to change again. Have you ever felt like even after forgiving someone, you still had one last piece of the puzzle to fit together? And this play, I was about to turn the tables. The morning after Amanda's visit, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I woke up with the feeling that I had done the right thing. Not the easiest, nor the lightest, but the right one. I prepared my black coffee, took a look at the garden, and sat in the office, the same one that housed years of paid bills, of mailed checks, of accepted silence. But that day, I would harbor something else, my last choice for them. I called the bank as I always did, but this time with a different attitude. The attendant recognized my voice. She called me Mr. Donald, with that old respect that is almost unseen. I would like to make a single emergency payment, outside the automatic debit system, a cashier's check for the amount of the overdue mortgage on Amanda's home. She confirmed the data. He asked if I wanted to reactivate the monthly debit. I replied firmly, no, this is the last one, and I want this to be recorded in the observation of the system. Single, final payment without renewal. That was it. One last gesture. Not by Travis, not by the adult Amanda, but for the children, for the memory of Margaret, who made me promise that I would take care of our daughter. And I took care of it, with everything he had. But taking too much care becomes suffocating, and love that suffocates turns into addiction, and addiction. After confirming the check, I went to the Citizens Bank right there in White Plains. I opened a trust account. Yes, I knew how to do that. I was an engineer for more than 40 years. It was not difficult to understand the clauses. This account would only cover my grandchildren's direct expenses, school enrollment, medical care, school meals. No card, no access by Amanda or Travis. All payments would need to go through my authorization and would be made directly to the institutions. It was a relief, I confess, because for the first time in years I could help without being exploited, protect without being sucked in, to love without being used. Back in the office, I wrote the shortest and most difficult email of my life. Amanda and Travis, I send attached the proof of the single payment of the mortgage. This is the last direct financial support I offer you. From now on, children's expenses, and only theirs, will be covered by a trust account with clear rules and access limits. For 15 years I contributed everything I had. Now, I choose to contribute with what makes sense. If you agree with this new form of support, I need a formal response and a public acknowledgement in writing of what has been done so far. I am not looking for belated gratitude, but rather clarity. Donald. I attached the receipt. I took a deep breath before pressing send, but I didn't hesitate. Sent. The silence this time came from the other side. Not a single line, no attempt to contest, no questions. It was the silence of those who understood that the game had changed, and that the board was now mine. You know, there is silence that screams, and this one screamed everything I needed to hear. If this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, will it help me to carry it forward? Like and subscribe here to the channel. This makes more difference than you think, and it gives me the strength to continue telling the stories that so many keep silent about out of shame or fear. But let me tell you something. That same day when I was putting the folders back away, I found an old, yellowed envelope with a date that made me cringe. 2007. Inside him, there was something that no one else knew. something that happened before it all started. And that explains why Travis never really swallowed me. Can you believe that? Even before their marriage, I had already seen what he was capable of doing. Well then get ready, because the next part is the one that moves me the most to this day. Amanda and Travis arrived in the late afternoon, each with a visible weight on their shoulders. Amanda seemed smaller, as if all the pride she once carried had been sucked into silence in the last few days. Travis, always with a firm step and a confident smile, was now dragging his ego, trying to keep his composure as each step betrayed his tension. I invited them to sit down, and they chose almost automatically places far from each other, as if the room itself were a minefield of unspoken truths. I took a deep breath and started, without haste. It's not about money, it's not about humiliation. I'm not here to buy excuses or to pretend that nothing happened. I'm here to teach you a simple lesson, which life insists on showing us too late. Responsibility and recognition can't be bought. They can be earned. Travis frowned. What do you want now, Donald? More excuses? More debt notes? I already said that we thank you. No, Travis, I replied, keeping the calm that only the experience of so many years can give. I don't want you to just talk. I want you to take over. I want you to recognize in front of everyone what I have done for you for 15 years. Starting with something public, a letter to the Westchester Journal. Write about how I have supported your family, about the support you have received. Honesty. No flourishes. No half-truths. Amanda looked at me, hesitant, the trembling hands clasped in his lap. Dad, is this really necessary? A public letter? It's more than necessary, Amanda. It is the only bridge left for you to understand that nothing is achieved without your own effort. May the children learn by observing, and you have not yet set any example. So write it down. And it doesn't end there. Facebook post. And then, a personal apology for every neighbor you deceived or deluded with the false idea that I was just a silent, faceless, storyless provider. Travis exploded. He slammed his hand on the table, which made the glasses clink. You want to humiliate us, is that it? I didn't move. I kept my eyes fixed on him. His voice was calm, almost monotonous, contrasting with his outburst of anger. No, Travis, I don't want to humiliate. I want your children to learn the lesson you never gave, who understand the value of taking responsibility, and you have not yet shown any sign of it. What I demand is learning, not spectacle. But learning sometimes requires shame, and you still have a lot to learn. Silence fell over the room like a heavy curtain. Amanda lowered her head as Travis took a deep breath, trying to collect his thoughts. The weight of responsibility finally began to settle on them. I could see in her eyes that, for the first time, shame was not external. It was internal. She was realizing that this was perhaps the only bridge to rebuild something that was still worthwhile. The trust of the children, the credibility of the family, and even the respect lost between us. Dad, do you really think this will work? Amanda whispered, barely audible, looking down at the floor. I don't know, daughter, but if there is no consequence, learning never happens. And if you want to rebuild, you need to start by assuming what has been done. It is the only way to prevent the same pattern from repeating itself. I let the silence extend a few more seconds, watching every movement, every breath, their frustration, doubt, wounded pride. It was all part of the process. Travis finally looked down, threw his hands back and muttered, So, let's do it. But it won't be easy. It won't be, I confirmed. Nothing worthwhile is easy. And at that moment, Amanda sighed deeply. For the first time in years, I saw in her something different, a true understanding, a recognition that did not need applause or praise, only the awareness that mistakes had a cost and that, finally, they needed to pay with actions, not words. As I watched, I thought to myself, there are times in life when silence teaches more than any sermon, and what I am preparing now for the next few days will be proof that even the most inflated pride can learn, as long as there is courage to stand before the truth. If you've been watching this far, you realize that teaching someone to recognize their flaws requires strategy, patience, and firmness. And I'm here, opening my heart, telling this story that could very well be that of anyone who has given too much and is tired of being invisible. If this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, will it help me to carry it forward? Like and subscribe here to the channel, it makes more difference than you think. But as Amanda and Travis tried to assimilate this moral imposition, I knew this was just the beginning. because the bridge I offered them was not just a lesson in responsibility. It was also a decision about the future of the children, about the respect that could still exist between us, and I couldn't let anything be corrupted by pride or fear. And here's the part that gives me the most goosebumps to this day. They didn't know it yet, but for this lesson to really work, I had one more move planned. A move that would completely change the family dynamic and test every word I said that day. Can you imagine what happens when the only bridge between shame and a fresh start is the decision of a grandparent who has finally decided to say no to exploitation? Well, that's exactly what comes next. The following days were strange. The town of Scarsdale, which had always been quiet and polished, began to show signs of movement. Whispers that passed from gate to gate, stares that lingered on the sidewalks. Amanda was the first to feel the weight. At the market, a neighbor who had always smiled politely now looked at her differently. "Amanda, I heard you had problems with the children's school. Is everything okay there?" he asked, with that tone of curiosity mixed with judgment. Amanda swallowed, blushed, and just mumbled something about everyday things. On the same day, Emma's teacher got in touch. The school already knew that payments were late and mentioned that the boys could be suspended if the situation was not regularized. Amanda couldn't lie. His voice trembled as he explained, and I heard on the other end of the line the accumulated frustration and shame. Travis, in turn, met up with former colleagues at Murphy's bar. One of them, who had not seen each other for years, approached and said quietly but audibly, "I heard that you lived at the expense of your father-in-law, man. Is that true?" Travis's arrogant smile faltered. He tried to laugh, but the sound was not convincing. Colleagues exchanged looks, some with surprise, others with silent disapproval. It was the first social coup. The world he thought was safe, made of status and appearances, began to crack. That afternoon, Amanda, cornered, called Aunt Liz, Margaret's sister, seeking consolation and perhaps a defense. "Liz, I don't know what else to do. Everyone is commenting. I didn't want it to get to that point." Liz, in a firm voice, confronted me on the other end of the line. "Donald, you're ruining your daughter's reputation. That's awesome." I took a deep breath before answering. "Liz, her reputation has always been built on my money. The house, the cars, the school, the vacations, everything that seemed like success, I paid for it. I'm just laying the foundation so that everyone can see that none of this was theirs alone." Silence on the other side. I heard her chew on the words, the surprise and the internal conflict. For the first time, no one could argue, because the truth had its own weight. The networks of lies that Travis and Amanda cultivated began to unravel into small cracks. What had once been polite smiles and superficial conversations now turned into appraisal glances, whispers, and subtly judgmentally charged comments. What I did was simple: expose the facts, documented, clear, so that the community would finally understand what had happened in silence for 15 years. I stopped for a moment, watching the neighborhood from the window. The houses lined up, the sidewalks cleaned, the cars parked, and in each one, people with their own stories, people who suddenly knew mine. And I realized that some memories have power, that some memories kept for years can completely change people's perceptions when they finally come to light. It is amazing how time does not erase facts. It only hides their impact until someone decides to reveal them. If you have a chest of memories, something that marked your life or that you kept for years, reflect now and, if you want, share in the comments something special that you remember strongly, something that transformed the way you see the world, or something that you discovered too late. But that does not stop teaching, and as their web of lies began to crumble, I realized that the hardest thing was yet to come, because it was not enough for the community to know. It was necessary for Amanda and Travis to face each personal and family consequence, to look into the eyes of the neighbors, to admit what they had always tried to hide. And I knew that the next step would be decisive, the moment when the truth would become palpable inside their own home, and not just in the eyes of the neighborhood. Can you imagine the tension of someone who finally sees his own building fall, piece by piece, in front of everyone who thought it was just a facade? That's that. And that's exactly what's about to happen. I called Emma and Tyler that afternoon. When they knocked on my door, they were nervous, clutching their school bags and with eyes that revealed confusion and fear. I felt a pang in my chest, because they didn't know what to expect, but they knew something had changed. "Let's go in," he said, trying to keep his voice steady and at the same time welcoming. I prepared a simple snack in the kitchen: Whole grain bread sandwiches, apple juice, and homemade cookies that Margaret used to make. I put everything on the coffee table where we always played board games on Sundays. Tyler looked at the biscuits but said nothing. Emma sat on the carpet, fiddling with her hair, restless. After a few minutes, I sat down with them at the kitchen table. "Do you know why everything is changing?" I asked calmly, looking each one in the eyes. Tyler shook his head. Emma, small and brave, said quietly, "Mommy said you got angry." I smiled slightly. "It's not quite that. I'm not mad in the sense you think, but life teaches in different ways. Sometimes helping someone doesn't mean you have to let yourself be used. Sometimes loving someone requires saying no. Do you understand?" They were silent, trying to soothe. Emma frowned. "But are you still going to help us, Grandpa?" I took a deep breath. It was the question I was waiting for. I smiled, and my wrinkles opened up like an old map. "Whenever it's fair. Not with luxury, with love. Because love is not measured in expensive cars, vacations, or toys. He measures himself in care, attention, and presence. I will always be here for you. But I can no longer pay the bill for the world that you think you deserve without your own effort." Tyler nervously wedged his fingers. "But this is different." "Yes, son. It's different because life is different now. We learn by growing. And growing also means facing limits, understanding responsibilities and valuing what you really have." Emma, small but insightful, looked at me and asked, "So, will we still have food, school, and our place to sleep?" I smiled and put my hand on her head. "Always. You won't miss anything that really matters. But the rest, the luxury and the extra things, that will depend on the effort of you and your parents. You need to see that not everything falls from the sky." We stayed there for a while in silence. They rolled some dice, placed pieces on the board, but now with another attention. There was something different about the way they looked at me. It was not fear nor curiosity. It was understanding. For the first time, they saw that I wasn't just that grandfather who gave gifts, who paid for everything, who smiled and said, "Okay." I was someone who wanted them to understand the real world, to learn the value of effort, patience, recognition. As I watched them, I realized that some lessons are not given with big words. They happen with presence, examples, and clear limits. And in that moment I felt that this conversation, simple as it seemed, would be remembered by them forever. A silent milestone, which would shape the way they would face responsibility and gratitude. I also realized something. Sometimes, the deepest love requires the courage to say no. And this courage, when seen by children, teaches more than any sermon could teach. After a while, Emma came over and said, "Grandpa, I think I get it. We need to help too, right?" I smiled, feeling a twinge of pride and mixed emotion. "Yes, dear. And that's the most important thing. Helping is good, but learning to do it for yourself is even better." Tyler looked at the board, then at me, and said with the innocence that only a child has, "Grandpa, we'll try, I promise." And at that moment I realized that the seed had been planted. They not only listened but understood, and that in itself was more valuable than any money I had ever given. When the two got up to leave, I walked with them to the door holding their hands. Emma looked back, smiled sheepishly, and said, "Grandpa, thank you for everything. Even if different, we'll be fine." I smiled and replied, "Always, love. Always." And as they closed the door and walked down the sidewalk, I felt that the change within them had already begun. They would return home different, not because I had given something material, but because they finally realized that love and responsibility go hand in hand, and that sometimes you have to miss it to value what really matters. But there was still something they didn't know, something I kept since before Amanda's wedding, a detail that would forever change the perception they would have of the world of adults, of responsibilities, and of me. And this discovery, that revelation, was about to come. Can you imagine what happens when the truth hidden for years is finally revealed to those who considered themselves untouchable? Well, that's exactly what's about to happen. Saturday morning, I found the envelope resting in the mailbox, with Amanda's familiar handwriting. I picked it up carefully, feeling a mixture of anxiety and curiosity. The paper inside was thick, formal, but with the weight of something deeply personal. I took a deep breath before opening it. The letter began simple, direct, but emotionally charged. To the Westchester Journal, I write this letter to acknowledge and thank my father, Donald. For 15 years, he supported our family with quiet generosity and unparalleled dedication. During all this time, I lived believing that it was only my right to receive your support, without ever thanking you as I should. Today, I realize that my father was the true provider of our home, that his efforts gave us stability, education, and comfort, and that we failed to recognize his dedication and love. This letter is a public and sincere apology, and an attempt to repair the respect that has always been due to him. As I read, I felt the weight of sincerity in my daughter's words. It was as if, after years of silence, finally someone was speaking from the heart, without fear, without disguise. Each line reflected the transformation I had seen in her, and at the same time, in fact, it reflected years of pain that everyone had ignored. My silent pain at seeing generosity being mistaken for obligation. When I finished reading, I took a deep breath and looked at the night that was beginning to fall over Scarsdale. The streetlights cast long shadows, and the silence of the house seemed heavier and at the same time more peaceful. Amanda had taken the first step, and that was all I could expect from her at that moment. Recognition, responsibility, truth. Shortly after, Travis, perhaps impacted by his wife's letter and realizing that the game had changed completely, published a note on social networks. It was short, but loaded with meaning. I assume my mistakes and recognize the importance of humility. I publicly thank my father-in-law, Donald, for the support he has always given us. May this message serve to show that learning to recognize when you make mistakes is as valuable as any professional achievement. I read each word slowly. I saw the reaction in the comments, the likes, and what caught my attention the most was the comment of a former colleague of Travis. Finally, someone has grown up, a small gesture of external recognition, but powerful. Because it wasn't just about what they felt inside the house. It was about the whole world realizing that the truth had been told. I sat in my chair, hands folded on my lap, watching the glow of the laptop screen reflecting off my glasses. It was as if the weight of 15 years had been lightened, not completely, but enough for me to feel that I had finally fulfilled what I promised Margaret, to protect her daughter, take care of her grandchildren, and keep the dignity of the family intact. Even in the face of ingratitude and arrogance, I thought about how simple moments can mark life forever. A gesture, a word, a letter written with sincerity. And I realized that this letter from Amanda would not only change the perception of the neighborhood, but also make room for real change within the family itself. Public recognition, sincerity, humility, words that carry more weight than any amount of money I could have given. As I stared at the screen, silence enveloped me again. There was no celebration, no applause, just the feeling that something important had been completed. The balance was finally beginning to be restored. I could feel the tension ease, the old wounds beginning to heal. But even with this relief, a different feeling arose. Because while the community and Travis had recognized what was fair, there was still something left that no one knew. One last detail, carefully guarded for years, which still needed to be revealed. Something that, if it were exposed, would transform everyone's perception of what really happened in that family, about the years of quiet generosity, about the true impact of my actions. I sat in silence for a few minutes, contemplating all this. The letter, Travis's post, the Facebook comments, each one was a step in rebuilding dignity, but I knew the most intense chapter was yet to come. Something that would change not only the way they saw me, but how they saw themselves as parents and as people who depended too much on another for so long. And then I took a deep breath, closing my eyes for a moment. I felt the tranquility mixed with the expectation of what was yet to come. The final revelation was near, and I knew it would forever change the dynamic of this family. Have you ever wondered what it would be like if, after years of appearances and deceptions, the truth suddenly emerged, straightforward and unquestionable? That's that. What comes next is just that. The truth, ready to change everything they thought they knew. The phone rang late in the afternoon, and I knew who it was before I even answered. Travis on the other end, his voice low, unlike anything he'd ever directed at me in years. There was no arrogance, no hurry, no contemptuous laughter that used to accompany every meeting. Just a simple request. I wanted to talk. I arranged for him to come to the balcony. The Westchester sky was already beginning to tint orange and purple, the kind of sunsets that always made my heart soothe, even on the most difficult days. He arrived, took a deep breath, and sat down in the wooden chair next to mine. Silence was our first dialogue. Neither of them said anything for a few seconds. The light wind swayed the leaves of the garden, bringing a soft sound that filled the emotional distance that had existed between us for so many years. Finally, Travis got started. With difficulty. "Donald, I never learned to be a real man. I always thought that status, cars, promotion at work, that was all. But now I see that respect cannot be bought. It is not imposed. It is not earned with arrogance. He wins himself, and I didn't earn a bit of it in the right way." I listened to each word carefully without interrupting. Nothing he said was new to me, but the difference now was in the tone. He was sincere. There was no longer any attempt to manipulate, to minimize, or to blame others. Just a confession. I took a deep breath and said, with the calmness that only years give, "Margaret said that a man's character does not appear when everything is going well. He appears when everything falls apart. And now, seeing you like this, I see that maybe there's still something in you that can be enjoyed, something worth preserving, something that can be passed on to your children, not for superficial impressions, but so that they learn the difference between ostentation and dignity." He lowered his head, and I could see the weight of years of arrogance dissipating, replaced by a silent conscience. I hope one day to be able to give back, Donald, even if it's just as an example for my children. Show them that recognizing mistakes is as important as any success you can achieve." I just nodded. I didn't need any more words. Silence, in this case, was our agreement. Justice had been done, not with shouting, not with punishment, but with transformation. A man finally acknowledging his mistakes, willing to act differently from now on. As I watched Travis slowly get up and walk away, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Tranquility. The feeling that a cycle was complete, that years of patience, silent care, and difficult decisions had finally brought real learning. The lesson was not only for him, but also for me. He showed that patience and steadfastness, even if painful, have power. That loving someone sometimes requires silence, boundaries, and the courage to say no. And I couldn't help but think of Margaret, smiling from somewhere, proud that, despite everything, her family was finally learning what she had always tried to teach. Character, dignity, and true love can't be bought, nor demanded. They show themselves when no one else is looking. I sat on the porch, breathing in the fresh air, watching the sky slowly darken. The feeling of silent justice filled my chest, and at that moment, I realized that stories like mine have power. Power of transformation, of awakening awareness, of showing that well-placed limits can save lives and teaching lessons that money and power could never achieve. There are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling we help another heart to breathe. Enjoy this video and subscribe, and let's make this story reach those who need it. But as Travis disappeared down the driveway, letting the night envelop the house, I knew the most intense moment was yet to come. Because Amanda and the children now had to face what came after the truth, recognition, and change of attitude of Travis, and I knew that each step that would still be taken would change not only the family's routine, but the way they would see love, responsibility, and the true value of a life built with effort. Can you imagine what happens when the whole facade of years of privilege and dependence finally dissolves before those who need to learn to live for real? That's exactly what's about to happen. The weeks that followed were silent but intense of transformation. Amanda and Travis decided to sell their house in Rye Brook. That property, which had been sustained for years by my quiet effort, now represented more than a home. It was a symbol of the standard of living that they had never really earned on their own merit. With the sale, they were able to pay off part of the debts, and for the first time in a long time they felt the taste of autonomy, even if tempered by the effort necessary to keep everything in order. They moved to a simpler neighborhood in Yonkers, a modest but welcoming area. The streets were smaller, the gardens less maintained, but there was something genuine there, an opportunity to start over without masks. Amanda started working part-time at a community school. The smile she showed now was different. It was that of someone who finally recognized that effort and dedication produce tangible results, and not just expectations of those who have always provided everything for free. Travis has also changed. It reduced their standard of living. She left the BMW aside and started using public transportation, learning to value the time spent commuting, observing the world around her, and above all, spending more time with her children. He learned the hard way that responsibility cannot be bought, and that the true value of being a father and husband lies in presence and example, not luxury. I watched everything from afar. I didn't interfere. He didn't need to. My silent presence was enough for them to feel the importance of acting correctly, of facing the consequences of their choices, and of rebuilding their lives on real foundations. I quietly funded Emma and Tyler's education, ensuring that their education continued smoothly, but I never transferred money to their parents again. The lesson needed to remain clear. Love and support do not mean exploitation. During this period, I began to realize something essential. Limits, when well established, do not break bonds. They strengthen them. The relationship with Amanda and Travis has changed noticeably. Now it was not based on obligation or fear, but on respect and truth. We talked frankly, without masks, and any request was carefully analyzed before being fulfilled. I could see in their eyes that while pride still bothered them, there was a quiet recognition of what it meant to have someone who really cares, someone who, even in silence, teaches steadfastly. Emma and Tyler quickly grew up in this environment, understanding that every gesture of care came with responsibility. They felt safe, loved, but also aware that nothing would come without effort. It was a quiet but profound transformation. Old habits of dependence were being replaced by autonomy, and gratitude was finally springing up genuinely. I looked out the window one morning, watching Amanda help Tyler with his math homework, while Travis prepared breakfast for Emma. A simple gesture but full of meaning. I remembered when gratitude disappeared in our family and I felt a surge of emotion. It is amazing how life gives us opportunities to correct what has been lost, even if slowly and silently. It's as if every small step of autonomy they took was also a victory for me, not for control, but for seeing that they finally learned to value what really matters. And there are times when you realize that real change doesn't need spectacle. There are no shouts, no applause, no photos shared. There are only consistent actions, respected limits, and the silent growth of those who have learned to walk on their own legs. And that's exactly what happened to them. The reconstruction was discreet, but definitive. The weeks turned into months. Every visit of mine to Yonkers was quiet, without tension, without demands. We watched the children play, talked about small everyday problems, and I let them learn from each challenge. The learning now was linked to real experience. Paying bills, organizing the routine, dealing with unforeseen events, and not to the expectation that everything would fall ready from the sky. What struck me most during this period was realizing how dignity can flourish even after years of emotional abuse and silent exploitation. Amanda learned to work patiently, Travis to be present and responsible, and the grandchildren? Well, they learned by example, watching their parents deal with boundaries and responsibilities in a mature way. It was a cycle of teaching that I had never been able to start with words alone. It needed action, real consequences. And as I watched, I felt that something that had previously seemed impossible was finally happening. There was mutual respect in the relationship, a care without exploitation, and the certainty that my decision to set limits, to say no when all seemed lost, had been correct. Justice did not come in the form of revenge nor open punishment. It came in the most delicate and powerful form there is, transformation. There are things that we live and keep in silence, but that, when told, may help others to realize the value of limits and true love. If this story touches you, if it makes sense, enjoy this video and subscribe to the channel. It's amazing how sharing experiences can illuminate paths for those who are in need of courage and clarity. But while everything seemed to stabilize, I knew that the final test had not yet happened. Amanda and Travis were rebuilding their lives, but the real lesson, the one that would test every value learned, was yet to come. How would they react when they faced the first real challenge without depending on me? How would they stand firm when the temptation to return to old habits arose? I knew that the moment would come, and it would define whether all patience, all limits, and all decisions would be truly understood and respected. And that's exactly what's about to happen. The phone rang on a quiet afternoon, and when I saw Emma's number, I felt a mixture of curiosity and tenderness. I answered in a calm voice. "Hello, honey, how are you?" The answer came in a hurry, full of enthusiasm and a little nervousness. "Grandpa, I have to do a work on who is your hero in real life. Can I talk about you?" I swallowed the emotion, feeling my chest tighten. I took a deep breath before answering. "If you want love, of course you can. She let out a nervous giggle, and I could hear the sound of paper and pencil in the background. For days, Emma dedicated herself to the project. When she finally turned it in, Amanda told me with a mixture of pride and surprise. The work was filled with old photos, carefully kept receipts, drawings made by Emma. Every detail told a story I never expected to see so consciously recorded by a child. There were travel photos, drawings of the old house, even small clippings that showed moments when I had quietly helped the family. And at the center of it all, the caption she wrote, "My grandfather is a silent hero. He saved my family even when no one thanked me." Amanda, moved, received the teacher's comments. "Your daughter understands more about character than many adults." She realized that heroes are not always the ones who appear in newspapers or on screens. Often they are the ones who act in silence, with love and courage. When Amanda called me that night, her voice trembled. "Dad, thank you for never having stopped loving us. Even when we forgot to see you, even when we failed to thank you, you were there. You saved our family, and now Emma realizes it. I realize that. I don't know how to express it, but thank you." I stayed a few seconds in silence, just listening, absorbing the depth of that moment. Her words were a balm no one could have imagined, an acknowledgement that came not from obligation, but from genuine understanding. Everything I had done in the previous years, the limits, the silent teachings, the difficult decisions to impose rules and teach responsibility, was now being understood by a new generation. Emma, with her purity and clarity, had grasped the essence of what it means to be responsible, to be just, and to love firmly. As I looked out the window, thinking about my granddaughter's sweet voice, I realized something I hadn't considered before. Sometimes the greatest reward doesn't come from public recognition or the immediate gratitude of those in front of us. It comes from seeing the fruits of our choices blossom in the next generation. And Emma, with her understanding, had become a reflection of what Margaret had always wanted her family to understand. That character and true love show in silent actions, not in appearances or empty words. Even though Amanda and Travis still had their challenges, this small show of gratitude from Emma brought a sense of completeness that words can't describe. She had seen, understood, and recorded in a way that would be remembered forever. And that, I realized, had an effect that no amount of money or control could achieve. It formed character, built values that would remain far beyond us. As I held my phone after the conversation, I realized how small actions can reverberate in unexpected ways. The silence that I have always cherished, the meticulous care and patience, finally bore visible fruit. Emma not only recognized my dedication, but also understood the meaning of courage, limit, and genuine love. And I realized that my family's history would not only be remembered for past mistakes or sustained luxuries, but for the reconstruction in which each member had the opportunity to grow and learn. Amanda finally understood. Travis began to absorb. And Emma, with her childlike clarity, showed that values transmitted with firmness can overcome any momentary lack of understanding. I felt a twinge of hope, because if a child can grasp this, then there is still a chance for the whole family to move forward with dignity, responsibility, and mutual respect. The love that sustains does not have to be continuous in the form of money. It shows itself in presence, consistency, and clear limits. And in that moment, looking up at the Westchester sky, the light breeze sweeping across the porch, I felt like I had achieved something I never imagined. Proof that quiet justice and true love can manifest in ways that change the course of generations. Emma, with her simple but powerful observation, brought to light what I have always known, that the impact of our actions is greater than any immediate recognition, and that fruits can come when we least expect it. But as he smiled at the silence of the house, he knew that there was still a final chapter to write, because the true proof of change is not just in observing, but in facing the world and applying everything that has been learned. And I knew that Amanda and Travis would soon have to face this test, a test of maturity and responsibility that would confirm whether all the lessons, boundaries, and decisions had finally taken root in a lasting way. Can you imagine what it would be like when the family, now rebuilt, has to live up to everything they have finally learned? Well, that final revelation is about to come, and no one would know how to react to it. I sat down in my favorite armchair, the one Margaret always said shaped me as if it had been custom-made, and took a deep breath. The silence of the room was absolute, except for the rhythmic ticking of the old wall clock that seemed to follow my thoughts. Next to me, Margaret's picture in the picture frame, her smile radiating the same calm she had always brought to our home, watched me as if she understood every beat of my heart. I closed my eyes and let my mind wander through the years that had passed. I remembered the beginning of my quiet generosity. When Margaret fell ill and left, I promised myself that I would take care of Amanda, that I would make sure she had stability and security. At that moment it seemed simple, a father doing what any father would do for his daughter. But life is rarely simple. Gradually, I realized that my dedication, patience, and financial effort became expected rather than appreciated. Every mortgage I paid, every car I covered, every school tuition I took on turned into an unrecognized obligation. I remembered the nights when I felt the weight of ingratitude, when Travis with his arrogant smile made me feel small, or when Amanda let on a silent disdain, unaware of what was being given to her. I felt like a loser, not for lack of money, but because every gesture of love seemed invisible, forgotten, taken for granted. There were years of silence, of emotional pain, of realizing that my dedication was not reflected in the recognition I expected, not even in the most basic respect. I slowly opened my eyes and looked around the room. On the coffee table were carefully guarded letters. Emma's letter, the work she had presented at school about me, filled with old photos, receipts, and drawings that captured my quiet generosity. Framed, the letter Amanda had written to the local newspaper rested on the shelf, a reminder of the transformation and sincerity that had finally emerged after so many years. I looked at the pictures of the children in their new school uniforms, their faces cheerful and safe, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. The peace of understanding that, despite the disappointments and pain, my worth never depended on immediate recognition. It resided in the truth I constructed, the choices I made, and the consistency of my presence. All the ingratitude, all the arrogance faced did not diminish what I did. On the contrary, they showed the depth of my character and the strength of my patience. I realized that silent justice, when done with love and firmness, has the power to transform hearts, teach lessons, and generate genuine respect, even if it takes years to happen. As my thoughts wandered, I remembered the dinner where Travis called me a loser, and the answer I gave. That phrase that started the whole change. How does it feel to know that this loser is no longer going to pay his bills? At that moment, I felt fear and a spark of courage simultaneously. It was the first time in many years that I had asserted my limits, that I had said no to silent abuse masquerading as family dependence. And looking now at everything around me, I realized that it was this gesture, apparently small, that started the transformation that had come up to this moment of peace. I remembered every call to the bank, every adjustment, every strategic decision to redirect resources, ensuring that Amanda and Travis learned to live with what they really had, while the grandchildren remained protected. I remembered their reaction, the initial anger, the despair that took over the house, and then the slow but steady understanding. Each step was a reflection of the importance of clear boundaries and the value of teaching with action, not just words. I mentally relived the moments of emotional crossing. Amanda's fright at discovering that there would be no more automatic payments, Travis's frustration at realizing that status and luxury were no longer sustained without self-effort, and finally, transformation. Amanda's letter to the newspaper, Travis's public social media post, Emma's acknowledgement, all signs that truth, when sustained with consistency and love, resists time and oblivion. My mind went back to Margaret. I smiled softly, remembering her voice, the words she said patiently. That character is not measured in easy times, but in times when everything falls apart. Now looking at the room, at the silent proofs of my journey, correspondence, letters, photos, drawings, I realized that my mission was accomplished, not because I was recognized at the exact moment, but because my values, my truth, and my quiet strength have survived the test of time. As I looked at Margaret's picture, I felt a wave of quiet gratitude. Gratitude for having had the opportunity to teach, to protect, to guide, and even to impose limits when necessary. Gratitude for having learned that true love does not mean always giving in, nor allowing abuse or exploitation, but rather creating conditions for those we love to grow with dignity and responsibility. And at that moment, I understood that all the effort, all the pain, all the patience, finally found its place. The family had learned profound lessons: respect, gratitude, responsibility, and love with boundaries. And I, sitting in my armchair, feeling the silence of the room embrace me, knew that the justice I was seeking was not in revenge, nor in confrontations, but in the silent transformation that could now be seen in the eyes and attitudes of Amanda, Travis, Emma, and Tyler. For a few minutes I just looked at everything: the letters, the photos, the memory of Margaret, the drawings and records of a lifetime dedicated to sustaining and protecting. I felt a deep emotion, mixed with sadness for the years lost in misunderstanding and pride in the way the truth had finally been established. And I realized something essential. My value was never in immediate recognition, but in the solidity of my actions, in the persistence of my love, and in the firmness of my limits. But even in this moment of peace, one last sensation enveloped me. The story, which seemed to be coming to an end, still had a detail, a last move that would definitively show that my silent strategy had worked. Because transformation, as complete as it may seem, is only real when it is sustained in the face of real life, of the choices that the family makes without direct supervision, but with the memory of what they have learned. And I wondered, will Amanda and Travis really be able to maintain that newfound dignity when they face their next challenges? Will Emma and Tyler continue to absorb the values that have now begun to flourish? And most of all, will my decision to set boundaries and teach firmly years ago reverberate in the right way in their lives? These questions hung in the air as the night wore on, signaling that the final chapter of my story was yet to unfold. I sat in the armchair for the last time that night, looking at the silent room, now full of memories that no longer weighed me down, but that carried the feeling of accomplishment. Amanda and Travis have finally learned to walk on their own 2 feet. They sold their house, reorganized their lives, and little by little, built a routine based on effort and responsibility. Emma and Tyler blossomed as conscious, cheerful, respectful children, aware of the value of every gesture of love and every well-placed boundary. And I, Donald, who so often felt like a loser for not receiving recognition, felt for the first time true peace. The peace of knowing that my quiet, steadfast choices transformed lives, that love and patience bore lasting fruit. The lesson I take with me, and that I want to share with you who are watching, is that dignity, character, and love are not measured by immediacy or easy gratitude. They are built with time, firmness, and often with the courage to say no, to teach that responsibility and truth are worth more than appearances and momentary privileges. And it is in this silent truth that we find strength, resilience, and emotional freedom. I want to take this moment to thank you from the bottom of my heart for accompanying me here, listening to this intimate story. If you can, leave your like. It's like a hug that warms and supports this channel, and subscribe, as an invitation to have the next coffee together again, sharing more life stories. Tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? Let's create this community of memory and learning together. And don't forget to activate the bell so you don't miss it when the coffee is ironed again. Don't go away yet. Listen to the next true story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story. Today I close my eyes and smile, because even in the face of so many losses I discovered that my greatest triumph was teaching, loving, and protecting, silently, and that this, finally, is what remains.